Hi, everybody. All right. This is a little tiny businesses activism. I have a consulting company. And before I get into any of that, I'm just going to start with what is activism? And I'm hopeful that you guys can give me some examples, maybe in the chat. So just a couple ideas. When you think of activism or a definition, what do you think of? So I'm seeing change for good, things that change perspectives, initiatives, picket lines, and visions, marches. Ooh, gluing yourself to famous paintings. I haven't tried that. That sounds fun. Being responsible. And I think that we can all agree those all fit sort of our general expectations when we talk about activism. I like to go to Oxford and definitions, as my background is in literature. And they define it as the policy or action of using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change. So then what is business? When we think about business, I don't think most of us think about social change, right? And I won't ask for examples. I think you're probably, I still will have here sort of similarly, definition from Oxford's dictionary, a person's occupation, profession, or trade, or the practice of making one's living by engaging in commerce. Melanie is maximizing profits. Well, that is some people's definition, right? But this is like, we're just going to go down to the basics here because we don't want to move towards that one, right? And a lot of times, when you think about change or social change and business, those things can seem kind of at odds, which is part of why I feel like this is such a neat topic to be exploring with folks. So when you think of business and activism, once again, maybe in the chat, do you have some ideas of activist business experiences that you've either seen or witnessed or heard about that are popular or easily referenced? Changing the shareholders to nature. I like that. Patagonia. Tom's Shoes, Zingerman's. And I like that. Dedicating a business to a purpose that is beyond profit, divestment, boycotts. And locally sourced produce. Thanks, Verena. That's one of the ways I think we can really integrate activism into our process. So Melanie referenced Patagonia. They actually had a campaign. You can see here there was vote the a-holes out. So you buy a pair of shorts, and then at some point, if you flip the tag over, you would see this little message. And it wasn't, ideological or anything. It was simply, this is our plan. And because they're a environmental focused clothing company, I'm assuming they expected most of their purchasers were likely in line with climate justice or climate action. However, it was a very simple message. And people, because it was discoverable, people had a lot of fun with that. Currently, there's a boycott of Disney in the US because of their pro-LGBTQ stance, as well as other things. This is very not highly followed Twitter profile, but it's getting a decent amount of media. A while back, there was a boycott of Chick-fil-A over anti-LGBTQ stance. And part of why I wanted to include at least one example of activism that is from a position that we, in our country at least, would consider to be conservative, because one of the things that I think happens a lot is we associate the concept of activism with a progressive agenda, and it's actually any movement towards your agenda and the change that you think is important. So it's an ideologically neutral experience. That's the Chick-fil-A thing. Dr. Bronner's is a soap here, and their activism is all over their every time you buy a bottle, it's covered in this label full of text, and their production is, they have their products tested to make sure that they're organic, they are cruelty-free. And even though they're covered in this activism, they talk about teaching the moral ABCs. I actually thought, in doing this project, I did some research, and they were actually started in 1948 because the original Dr. Broner's parents were killed in the Holocaust. And so he wanted to amplify a message of unity and what he called the moral ABCs of coming together across religious and ethnic divides. It's also a really great soap. And then Sushi and the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, which is actually known by the name of the Moonies. So the Family Federation, or the Moonies, in 1980, the leader lined out a plan to get fish being sold in this country, in the United States. And so they provide the majority of the fish to sushi restaurants, and that funds their church at about an annual revenue of about $500 million a year. So just to give an example of activism as business, and it's, once again, it's ideologically neutral. So it's really about, what is your goal? How do you want to show up in the world? And how do you to set your business up in a way that reflects that? When I heard Melanie talk last year, and she talked about fighting business models with business models, that really struck me, because it is often considered unprofessional to talk about personal things at work or acknowledge life situations. A lot of the popular business models that we follow are primarily compartmentalized. They compartmentalize us from our personal life as well as our impact as a business. And so by working to create alternative business models for people to opt into, we can work to build better options, both for ourselves, for the people that work for us and that we work with, as well as our communities, and also, one would hope, the planet and the animals as well. So, and when we use our skills and passions as part of our business in committing to human-centered regenerative business models and goals, we can balance out and possibly even overtake some of these more destructive defaults. I think about it as more of an integrated business model, where we include both ourselves as people as well as the people that we work with. I did the math a while ago and realized if I worked from a values-oriented position, I could have a larger impact in the world around me and the things that matter to me. So that was part of my motivation. I also, for about 18 years, primarily worked as an activist in social justice and LGBTQ spaces, and I received a certificate of special recognition from Congress for my community work, which included immigration equity, economic justice, and anti-racism work. So when I started my company, I had been working from a values-oriented, impact-driven perspective for a very long time, and it was something that was very important to me to continue to do. So in my business right now, the consultancy that Melanie spoke of, I do business development and organizational strategy for companies that work from a set of values. While profitability is a success factor that's included in their company metrics, the enactment of their values is equally a priority. My goal in creating my company was to work with people that I respect, to support projects and companies that I believe in, doing work I find fulfilling. I've set it up so that I can do that. And because of my history in activist spaces, I've often been able to teach well-meaning business owners the skills they need to integrate their values into their business, as well as how to build structures and systems that are kinder and more efficient. What I found is that doing values-aligned work, for me, that means prioritizing people and the planet, including yourself, as well as the people that you work with, is often more effective, efficient, and profitable. I intend to use the learning that I get from this program to expand the business development offerings that I have to include support for setting up more of these types of systems and tactics for my clients, and also to show them there are, or raise awareness of these other ways of doing business that are more functional. So there's two pieces to this activism for my business, which is both I committed myself to working for values-aligned companies and people. And then also I ground myself in my own values, my integrity, clarity, and sustainability. And this is some examples of some of the places that I've done that. I supported the development of a t-shirt company to sell clothing with values-oriented messages. This was several years ago. They are no longer in business. They moved on to a different project. But I also worked with an art company. They did monologues from undocumented residents in the US that they then had performed by local law enforcement and public officials to bring the stories of these folks into the dominant culture. I have a podcast that I've been running for about 1.5 years that promotes new ways of doing business or thinking about business that are more integrated. And I work with a company or a nonprofit that is developing a business side, Harmony Voices, and they are working to build that side through selling CBD products and now using hemp paper to support their climate activism. And in each of these cases, it is very personal expression. Somebody mentioned that. And at the same time, I think that's more realistic. We are all people doing business. And so finding ways to get away from this idea of being compartmentalized and being more inclusive as a full human is, I think, in addition to being a good thing for the planet, it also really does work. It works much better for most people. It's just can feel a little awkward when you first start. So I just want to leave you with the question of like, when you're for your business's activism, whatever that is, whether you work for someone or you're a consultant or you're an entrepreneur, when you think about post-growth entrepreneurship and this program, what and where are the ways you're going to bring that into your efforts? And I'm always happy to chat about that. I'm a little passionate about it. So I put my email on here if you ever want to shoot me an email and set up a time to talk about things that you're up to. I love brainstorming that. And I'm really excited to be here and be part of that program. And if you want to pop any of your thoughts about the ways that you can make this happen for yourself, I'm happy to also receive that. We've got a couple of minutes. And thank you for letting me do this, Melanie.
Of course. Thank you for coming. I'd like to open up the floor to questions. Would anyone like to, you can feel free to turn on your mic and ask Aicila some questions.
Okay, I'm jumping in. Hi, everybody. I'm curious what prompted the transition from you from from what I understand, full activist to business consultant. Like what, I feel like a lot of people spend a lot of time in either one space, but they don't transition from one to another. So what prompted that for you?
Survival. Most grassroots activism, I didn't have healthcare or a future plan in terms of that. And I felt like I needed to find a way to, that's what Melanie was talking about initially with activism. Ultimately, we don't value, at least here, the work that people do. And the other piece of it was I didn't want to be so narrowly focused. I have a strong commitment to the LGBTQ community and that work. I did a lot of work there. And as I did the work, I realized that the other issues that I was also focused on, like economic justice and climate activism, and they were all part of that, but they weren't as included. So it was kind of a combination of both pieces. And I really like business development. Honestly, I really like getting into the tedious weeds of spreadsheets and resource management and making things run efficiently. So I work with like 6 companies right now and help them with their efforts to be more effective and efficient. And I can bring also these different pieces into that. So combination, but the first question was really looking at, like, I'm getting older, and someday, because I live in a country where healthcare is not funded, I might need to have enough money in the bank for pay for those things. So.
Does anyone else have a question for Aicila?
Gil,
It's Jill.
Jill, thank you.
So my question is, sorry, it took me a while to sort of tune in really. Why is this still so unusual?
Business as activism, or yeah. I mean, I can think of a lot of reasons. I think the dominant narrative, I hear from people regularly that oh, that doesn't work. There's this concept of professionalism, like I said, that's very compartmentalized and not super accurate. And it causes, I think, a lot of distress. And also it's what people think is the way. That's why I like this program. And I think getting stuff like this into business schools where people can start to see, because the reality is there are a lot of people doing alternative business practices. I see it all the time, but it doesn't make it up into the day-to-day conversation. And my theory on that is that most current advertising is about getting things to your door as easily as possible to tell you about how you're deficient and what you're lack so they can sell you something. And when you come from a place of saying everything, you're not lacking, there's no problem, you just can't maybe do it all yourself, so you need some support, it's a different model. It's, like I said, it's more sustainable, it's more integrated. A lot of people have the idea that if it doesn't hurt, it's not really work. I definitely do that sometimes. So I think there's a lot of different factors. And I think some of it is we need to talk more about it.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Aicila, for your contribution here. Well, perhaps if anyone does want to get in touch with her after the fact, you're willing to share your email, right?
Yeah, and I popped it on that last slide. And like I said, that I'm really passionate because I feel very strongly that my best attribute around this is to give other people opportunities for access and to help them problem solve so that we can have as many people out there as possible working towards this common good.